Okay, welcome everyone joining us today from across Asia and Europe for our webinar on what is the future of the environment in Society 5.0. This webinar is brought to you in collaboration with ASEF, between ASEF and the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies and the TechForGoodInstitute. My name is Freya Chalpool and I'm the Youth Project Lead here at the Asia Europe Foundation, and I'm really delighted to guide you through today's session. Before we begin, let me give you a quick overview of what's in store for this 90-minute session. So I will begin with a brief introduction to set the context of today's session, followed by a keynote presentation from Mr. Martin Kruse. We'll then move into a panel discussion and Q&A featuring distinguished experts sharing with you their insights on the future of the environment in Society 5.0. So during the Q&A and throughout the session today, you'll have the chance to share your thoughts and ask questions. So you can use the Q&A function on your Zoom panel to post, upvote, or reply to questions and join the discussion as well. We really encourage you all to engage with each other in the chat. So feel free to also share, where you're from, your name, where you're from, your LinkedIn profile perhaps, and you can continue the conversation beyond the session today as well. And if you see any questions in the Q&A that really interest you, you can also reply to these questions from each other so that you can continue these conversations beyond what is happening in the panel discussion. With that, I think we can get started with some introductory points. So to begin, the context of today's session. So as many of you know, ASEF is an intergovernmental organization. We're dedicated to strengthening mutual understanding between Asia and Europe. So through various thematic programs that we run, we bring together governmental and civil society stakeholders to foster connectivity, collaboration, and joint solutions to global challenges. And one of our flagship initiatives is the ASEF Young Leaders Summit. It's a leadership development program that unites young leaders from across both regions to learn, exchange, and connect. So today's session here with us today is part of the online knowledge building phase of the 6th edition of the ASEF Young Leaders Summit, which brings together 80 selected young leaders for the full program. But we're also delighted to open up this session today to an even wider audience, and it's really wonderful to see over 120 of you with us here today. At ASEF, we've been exploring this theme of leadership in Society 5.0 for the past 3 years, focusing on how we can equip young people for a more human-centered future where, economic progress is balanced with solving societal challenges through the integration of technology. And this webinar series is designed to spark ideas, inspire discussions on the 3 key themes that we're looking at: the economy, the environment, and people and work. And today we've invited some expert speakers from diverse backgrounds to share their perspectives with you, insights that we really hope you'll carry forward into deeper conversations with your peers in today's session, but also your peers in your community. So with that, I think I've spoken enough, and we're ready to begin ready to begin the first segment of our session, which is the keynote presentation. So to set the stage and provide an overview of the future environmental trends shaping Asia and Europe, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Martin Kruse. Martin is heading the research on environment and resources at the Copenhagen Institute of Future Studies. He has worked extensively with sustainability and was selected to join the expert panel providing recommendations on green growth for the G20 meeting. His work primarily focuses on food, energy, climate, water nexus. He's also worked within building and housing and security. Martin's areas of expertise are within climate change, energy, food nexus, commodities, geopolitics, sustainability, green consumption, investment strategy, and the methodology of future studies. There's a lot of expertise there in one profile. So thank you so much for joining us today, Martin. We're really excited to hear your insights. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Freya, and welcome everyone who have chosen to participate in this webinar. Shortly, I'll just get my slides here up, hopefully, so you can see them. I'm going to be talking today about climate about the issues that we face. Um, and of course, in the context of Society 5.0. So first off, just to maybe introduce myself a bit more, or the institute. For those of you who don't know us, we are a non-profit institute, a think tank which has been around since 1969, which is why we have this old photo of John F. Kennedy and our founder. So we've been working with foresight for plus 50 years, and we work in various fields and with all kinds of different organizations. So governments and intergovernmental bodies and corporates, typically larger clients. Society 5.0. So the world we are moving into, you could say, is a world where we increasingly see the use of technologies that can aid us in various ways. We see a lot of different kinds of trends. So this is maybe a picture that, to a certain extent, encapsulates some of these things. A world where we try to go carbon neutral. We try to live in a world where we do not, as we have done in the past, focus on emitting CO2, having a fossil-based economy, but rather having a zero carbon economy. But that also means that we need to focus a lot more on biodiversity. We are in a situation where the biodiversity in the world is falling, is in a almost a crisis state, you could say. And while there's a lot of focus on especially carbon, we also need to think about how do we create a world, a future world where we focus on resources. That means a much more sustainable and circular economy. Now, this is in no way an easy task, and I'll get into that. The concept of Society 5.0 is not just about the Internet of Things, about the use of digital agents and big data, AI, and so forth. It is very much also a concept of how do we use all these technologies to benefit society and integrate people. But with that said, people, and this is one of the things I will emphasize in this short talk, is both a um, a problem in the sense that we don't necessarily do what we should do all the time. So when we talk about technology, we might have a tendency to overestimate the impacts of technologies and not think about how do we actually get people to act in a manner which is aligned with the trajectory we want to go. So we have all these technologies, but we also need some sort of environmental awareness, and this is going to be these two areas that we're going to discuss today. Just to give you kind of a flavor of what that means, what Society 5.0 means. I will give you an example. Just if you look at this is a building in Copenhagen which is being built. We're looking at a building that is using or reusing demolished materials from other buildings. In this case, it's from Carlsberg. So in this case, we need to consider this at a macro scale. How do we go about creating supply chains that reuse materials? It will look quite different than what we've used to. And I think when we talk about these changes that we are seeing, I would emphasize that we are basically building a new economy. And we're basically building or rewiring the economy in many different ways. If you imagine the complexity of this operation of having a building where you don't source virgin materials, you don't you don't have the traditional supply chain, but you have to wait for materials that has been used other places to actually be there for you to use it. And this is particularly of interest if you're using a particular kind of a material that is in short supply, and that becomes a logistical issue. So we need to think about this as a very much a different way of dealing with many of the issues that we have, and there's a lot of problems that come with this. So this is a supply chain issue. So we need a different way of having supply chain management than we have had before. There's also timing and a risk issue we need to consider here. When are the materials we need? When are they available? That means we probably need to have, to a certain extent, new business models to integrate this. And it kind of goes to show that this is just not something we will go and do. This is really, in many ways, a rethinking of many of the structures that we have. Another example of this I could show is, and this is particularly when we talk about industry, is that we will probably see to a larger extent a more symbiosis, industrial symbiosis, so integration of different elements. So in this case, we have a biogas plant, and that biogas plant produces biogas that can be synthesized into green hydrogen and CO2, and maybe be able to create disposable bioplastics. This is research that is being done in China. Or similarly, you can take biogas and you can upgrade it, synthesize it into hydrogen to decarbonize steel production. So what you're seeing is basically the integration of a lot of actors that were not integrated before. So we need to consider this as a system-wide transformation where the byproduct of one company becomes the raw material of another. And to do this transformation and to make sure that the materials that I get is in the proper quality, we cannot just take let's say, a buildings materials that's been used in a nuclear facility and put it up in a kindergarten. We need to make sure that we know how it's been used and track that. And that means we need a digital layer on top of all the material flows that we have. We probably need shared revenue business models, thinking about how we make sure that people will deliver the materials in the right quality to us. And that means we need pricing strategies on top of this. And probably we will need to monetize. So what does that mean? It means creating incentivizing through money, other people's and assets to be used in the proper way. So just a couple of years ago, there was a conference in Copenhagen about what do we do when we don't build anymore, when we don't new build anymore, but rather we only build with what is there. The challenge here is quite great. So this is one of the some of the aspects that we see when we're moving into Society 5.0. We're talking about a rather new way of thinking about how we interact with one another. It means new types of partnerships. It means thinking much more systemically about the integration of data, but also about materials and supply chains and so forth. That means risk management and all that. Now, in moving towards this society, which will be tech-enabled, but will always and foremost be human-focused and human-centric, there is, of course, a range of barriers and challenges. barriers and challenges that we are facing today as well. So let me just skip to a different area. Let me skip into biodiversity just to stop with that for a minute. If you bear with me and make a thought experiment, the Brazilian rainforest is today home to some 13% of global animal and plant life. Now, they have a conservation budget of roughly 180 million. Now, let's imagine for a bit that it would be home to 100% of the world's animal and plant life. Now, if we make that thought experiment, we could say that the global value of all animal and plant life would be some 0.07% of the value of Meta. Now, that goes to show that we don't really value the world or nature that much. And this is a problem when we talk about many of the issues that we face, especially in terms of biodiversity. That animal life is really deteriorating because it's not part of the global economy. We don't price it. We don't have externalities that we or polluters pay principle that makes it possible for us to actually embed these issues into our economy. So we know how to do this. A couple of years ago, there was a what is called the Statement on Carbon Dividends, which was a number of economists that went together and signed this paper on the need for a carbon tax. And what they're focused on here, and I think this is important, is to say that what they are doing is they're correcting a market failure. Now, within economics, the fact that we do not have a polluters pay principle is a market failure, and it's a well-known market failure. Now, the reasons why we don't have that is, of course, that if you look at the country's primary exports around the world, now that can be oil, it can be fossil fuel cars, it can be coal. Now, if you look at these, the primary export of the different countries in the world, what we see is that they are related to carbon in one way or another, making it very difficult for us to actually create a unified carbon tax globally, which would make this change so much easier, because it would set in motion the market dynamics rather than this stop-go strategy you could say that we to a certain extent have, and the issues we have with international agreements or lack thereof. Another barrier I think is interesting that we need to consider when moving forward to a society 5.0 is the fact that if you look at other societies, let's just talk a bit of industrial revolutions. We saw the first wave of the industrial revolution was very much about the steam engine. It created actually the world we're living in today. The advancement from the move from the agricultural society into the more advanced industrial society, and later on a more digital society. These moves were in large part in the beginning, it was fueled by and came from the UK in the beginning, and later the US particularly after the Second World War. And what we've been seeing is actually that is look at world GDP growth long term. What we're seeing is globally it's kind of slowing down. So we need this new engine of growth, and this new engine of growth could be this Society 5.0, because it would need so much innovation. As I just said in the beginning of this talk, we would need to redo a lot of stuff. That requires innovation, and that would maybe push us into a situation with greater GDP growth. Now, the issue that I think is interesting about this is, if you're looking at especially green technologies, be it wind, be it EVs, solar, pretty much any green technology that you're looking into, those technologies are today very much produced in China. And so there's an issue here, because we're moving from this American-led world to at least from a technology part, a Chinese-led world. So the question is, to what extent will this hinder the shift to this green future? Will supply security issues, strategic autonomy issues, as we're seeing in Europe now, being increasingly talked about, will they hinder this change? This goes to the very essence of what we're talking about here in terms of Europe, Asia relationships and leadership at a global scale. How do we do this when we go forward? So shifting here from this tech focus and political focus into to leadership, and also thinking about self-leadership and the individual person's responsibility. What is the role of us, of the people? See, we did a survey of Danes, but I would say that this is a representative survey of many people around the world, especially in what you can call advanced economies. Now, the first thing we asked people was, are you worried about climate? And 60%, 62% of Danes were very worried about the climate. Yes, they were. So are you willing to do something to change your lifestyle? 55% said yes, they are willing to change their lifestyle. And here comes the knocker, because then you start asking, really? 40% were willing to pay a CO2 tax. And you see, we go from a majority to a minority. We're moving in, and we're starting to actually showcase the price that you have to pay. And then we asked, are you doing something? We're looking at what are they actually doing. We're down to 21%. And then came the question, we looked into, is there an effect of what you are actually doing? And we were down to some 5% of people that could be said to have not a zero CO2, as it says here, but rather what could be expected of them if they wanted to reduce their CO2 emissions as much as possible. So what came out of this result was a couple of things. One thing is that people really, really want change, but they rather want someone else to change rather than themselves. So I think this goes to the very essence of leadership and self-leadership, really, because people go, well, politicians should do something, or companies should do something. But the thing is that companies, they will definitely supply the products if there's a demand. And when the companies create products that are typically, they will be more costly, there is no demand. So it's always upon us to a certain extent, because both politicians and to a certain extent, or that goes especially for companies, they are demand driven, but so are politicians. So there's this climate chasm that we need to overcome in order to move to the Society 5.0. I don't know what to do. Someone richer than me should do something. We tend to do that. In Denmark, people are on average 20 times richer than the average person on the planet. So, but still people will go, well, somebody with more money should do something. Or we go, there's a technology that will come and save us. And we often end up with talking about this as though there's some way that technology can come and save us without really asking ourselves the question, what can I do? And should I actually pay the price? Now, this is, of course, a situation where we want politicians to come in and guide us as well. And when we ask people about, in the survey I just referenced, about, well, are you willing to move to this society where there's this greater focus on climate change? They don't. They want the change, but they don't vote for the change. They want the change, but they don't buy the products that will enable the change. So to me, there's at least a great focus on this personal, you could say, responsibility. How do we get that back? Now, what's interesting about this is also that um, uh, I'm no different, you know. It's not that I'm some sort of saint. I travel and use airplanes and all that. We really need to help each other to move towards this, to make it the way that every one of us acts. And just a little bit of change will do something. But getting across and away from first the uncertainty, is there even an issue? We moved past that 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Now we're into, should I actually do something? And that becomes a problem. So we need to move into action and then into a society 5.0 where change is actually happening, because technology of and in itself will not do it for us. So I think there's some issues that we need to discuss also in terms of the move to 5.0. The fact that we have a design flaw in the representative democracy and social behavior, you could say. We have no representation of the unborn. The UN has been focused on the last summit that we also helped and participated in, the last UN summit in September. There is a focus now increasingly on the unborn, but this is not something that we have seen historically. So the fact that we're doing something for people who are not all of them alive today makes it difficult for us. There's no incentives for politicians to think long term because they have a short election cycle. So how do we actually get this long-term perspective in so that we actually move towards a society 5.0? And citizens, as we saw in our surveys, they want a free choice, but they don't exercise their free choice because they don't want anyone else, politicians, to tell them or to give them or come with laws or legislations or carbon taxes, but where they have the free choice, they don't choose. And citizens at the same time say they need more information and knowledge, but the best educated have the highest carbon footprint. And even when we look at youth, there's the Greta Thunberg generation, you could say, that wants a better life. But you look at the money they use on clothing, it's quite extensive. So we have this issue of none of us is actually living up to the hopes and dreams that every one of us shares. So how do we actually do this? I think these are some of the questions that we need to tackle. The fact that we have an ethical dissonance. What is that? Well, basically, it is the inconsistency between the moral self-image. I'm a good person. I like myself, and yet I don't do any of the things that is associated with the values I have. Well, not enough. So there's benefits for me to do unethical behavior. So I would like to take this as a jumping point into segue into some of the discussions that we have. So we have a technology strata, and we have a people-centered strata, and they kind of go together. We need to talk about how do we get technologies work for us, but what is our role in this as people as well? So this is a little bit of what I think about when I hear the word Society 5.0. I think about all the possibilities that it affords us, but I also think about all the barriers that we have, and no least barriers that are within every one of us here. I mean, because every one of us have a tendency to say it's somebody else's problem, but we have to go and make it our own problem. I think it was Gandhi who said that if you want change in the world, it starts with yourself. Or maybe it's a Michael Jackson song, I can't remember, but I think it's right in any case. Um, so with that, I think it's time to start the discussion. And I will introduce first off, I think Angelica have a couple of points that she would like to make. And I would move on afterwards to listen a bit to Ranita and Joe, just to touch upon some of the thoughts you have when you think about Society 5.0. And I usually have this, at least when I talk to journalists, I tend to go, well, instead of you asking me questions, maybe I should tell you what to ask me, because, I know what I like to focus on myself and where my competence is. So I think I will go and do the same with you, and let you start off with what's on your mind when you think about Society 5.0, the technology, the human aspects and whatnot. Starting off here with
Thank you, Martin. Perhaps I give some
Angelica.
quick introductions to our wonderful panelists before we hear from them. Thank you for your really, really insightful keynote presentation. I think that's all left us with some very interesting thoughts. I give some quick introductions, and then we can hand over to each of our panelists to start and share their thoughts and their introductions as well. So first, let me introduce Ms. Angelika Tamasova, who works at the European Environment Agency, leading the analysis of progress towards climate resilience under the European Climate Law. And her work supports European policy making by drawing on country reporting under the governance regulation. But prior to this, she served as a ministerial policy advisor, focusing on national climate adaptation policy. And her expertise spans local, national, and European levels, including policy development, assessment, capacity building, and international cooperation. So thank you for joining us today, Angelica. Next, we have Mr. Gerald Wong. Gerald is the Executive Director of EB Impact, a Singapore-registered charity established in 2019, which is dedicated to advancing sustainable development by delivering youth and education programs in Singapore and the wider Asia region. At EB Impact, Gerald provides overall strategic leadership, oversees the organization's operations, and works with the EB Impact team and its stakeholders to scale its impact across the region. Gerald's background has been primarily in charity and arts and social change sector, and he has an academic background in arts management, as well as now pursuing a master's in nonprofit management as well. And last but certainly not least, we welcome Ms. Ranita Nolita, or Lita, who has a bachelor's degree in fisheries from IPB University. And over the last decade of working in environmental conservation, she has been focused on sustainability issues supporting MSMEs, particularly in the area of waste management, marine conservation, and ecotourism, through the implementation of many high-value projects. She is the founder and managing director of Waste Hub, through which she has demonstrated a strong commitment to environmental and social impact. And she's also contributed as a UN consultant since 2023. So we have a very, very diverse background of all of our panelists here. Thank you all for being with us today. Quick reminder to everyone in the audience that you can submit your questions for Martin and the panelists via the Q&A function on Zoom. Feel free to upvote questions you find interesting, respond to others, and join the conversation. So with that, I'll hand the floor back to Martin for this panel discussion. Martin, over to you. Martin, I think you're on mute currently. No problem.
Sorry. I'll actually just hand it over to Angelica, posing the question that I just did. What's on your mind when you think about Society 5.0?
Yes, very good day to everyone here. I'm really pleased to be here and joining the discussion on Society 5.0. And when it comes to my first thought, I would say this is extremely relevant. It tackles both the technological transformation we are right now currently living in, with AI influencing our daily life more and more. And on the other hand, it really grasps on the societal changes and the challenges we are facing. And I think I also brought a few key messages here relevant both to technology and especially society in the light of the climate crisis. So let me know if it's okay to share my screen,
Yeah, I'm
or if
thinking
you
you
would
have some
like to.
slides that you want to share. I mean, maybe we'll take
Yes.
that right now.
Yes, okay, so I could start with my introductory intervention. Just give me a second to share my slides. Okay, could you please confirm that you can see them in the right mode? Yes, great. So I would start with a brief introduction of the European Environment Agency, as you may not be familiar with our institution. We are a European agency, an agency of the European Union. We are independent, serving the European Parliament, the European Commission, the EU member states, but also the European citizens. And we were founded a little bit more than 30 years ago, and we are based also in Copenhagen, which is a nice coincidence, I would say. And so when it comes to the agency's purpose or mission, I would just briefly summarize it in key points. First, we collect data, the data which is based on the requirements stemming from the EU legislation. And by collecting data, we also create knowledge, and we feedback this knowledge to the policy-making processes, both at European and national levels, to enable evidence-based policy making. We tackle three areas, three very broad areas: environment, climate, and sustainability. And you are very welcome to visit our website via the QR code if you would like to see in detail what we work on. We have really a broad coverage of these issues. When it comes to our mandate, we are tasked to prepare the State of the Environment in Europe report, which comes out every fifth year, and I will talk about it a little bit later. And we also maintain and steer the network of the European experts. We have a network called European Information and Observation Network, where we have thousands of European experts. We link them together, and we facilitate capacity building. We facilitate sharing of good practices and mutual learning and cooperation. And last but not least, our purpose is, of course, to inform the European citizens, but also worldwide anyone who would like to look into data, which is quality assured, which is reliable, and see what kind of knowledge and trends are identified based on the data. So that would be us. And now I would move to a few key messages I would like to present to you, just to also inform the discussion today. As I mentioned, we are currently preparing the Europe's Environment 2025 report, which is our flagship product, and it's going to be published on the 30th of September. So I will give you a little bit of sneak peek to the key messages. I also think they really closely link to the messages presented by Martin in his keynote speech. But so what is this report? This report is about the state of the environment in Europe. Our task is to assess, based on the data we collect and the data we have, what is the condition of Europe when it comes to its environment based on the policy targets. So we always provide kind of like an evaluation and an assessment. This is what we do. And we look at the last 5 or 10 years to see how things are going, what kind of trends can be identified. And we also provide an outlook to 2030 when it comes to the EU policy targets. So what's the probability that we will reach those targets? We will provide a main report, and we will provide 35 topics on environment and climate. We will call them policy thematic briefings. And also we will prepare and publish country profiles for our member and cooperating countries. And the profiles will dive into a set of indicators showcasing how the countries are doing on the national level when it comes to reaching environment, climate, and sustainability goals. Here I would like to briefly mention our geographical coverage. As an EU agency, we closely cooperate with the 27 EU member states, but we also have member countries like Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, or Turkey. We collaborate with our cooperating countries on the West Balkan, and under the energy community, we also cooperate with Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova. So our focus is broader than the EU, but it's still very much European. And now when it comes to the key messages, so what we see when we look at our data, well, we see that unfortunately, actually, we are living in a crisis. We are living turbulent times in Europe as citizens when it comes to economy, when it comes to societal changes, geopolitical shifts, and environmental issues. And the first two key messages would be on biodiversity and water. So when it comes to ecosystems and biodiversity, unfortunately, we see a decline based on our data. 80% of the protected habitats in Europe are in a poor or a bad condition, which is not a great sign. When it comes to water resources, the water resources are under stress, and 35% of the European population faces some kinds of issues related to water. On the other hand, just to also give you positive messages, for example, when we look to climate change mitigation and greenhouse gas reduction, Europe as a whole and the European Union is successful and can be considered as a leader at this field because European Union is reaching all the targets when it comes to climate change mitigation. There was a 37% of reduction reached and when we compare to the levels of 1990, we have a climate neutrality goal by 2050. We are negotiating right now the 2040 target, and a 55% reduction is expected to be reached by 2030. So that field is doing quite well when it comes to the number of the ASEFYLS. And the other field I would like to emphasize is the pollution reduction, which also appears to be successful in Europe. Under pollution, I mean air pollution, noise, pesticides, and chemicals. And this is very closely interlinked with the health. So those are the few key messages. And just to sum up this slide, I think we can still say that Europe is facing significant sustainability challenges, and they are complex and intertwined. But the main message what I would like to send out with this is that it's incredibly important to restore nature, to manage sustainably natural resources, because that can secure both the high quality of the life and the health of the European citizens, and also economic development. And my last slide is about another flagship product we have published in 2024. It's the European Climate Risk Assessment, the first kind of European climate risk assessment. And currently we are working on an extended second version, which is planned to be published in 2028. So we will follow 5-year cycles here as well. And here the key messages I would like to present to you is the first is Europe is the fastest warming continent when it comes to changes in the climate. We experience issues with heat and we experience issues with water, either too much water in a very short time in form of flash floods or extensive flooding, or on the other hand, the lack of the water in forms of long-term droughts. We have two hotspots in Europe when it comes to these quick changes. One is the Arctic region, which is warming up definitely in a faster pace than the rest. And the other is the Mediterranean region, where the risks are already reaching concerning levels or the catastrophic levels, and their risks need to be addressed. So another message related to the climate risks is the economic losses we are facing because of climate change. And I have a new number to present to you, because we have an indicator on economic losses caused by weather and climate-related events, and it comes to losses of assets. And in the period of 1980 and 2024, we have lost 738 billion euros because of climate change. And most of those losses are not insured, so we are facing a considerate insurance protection gap. When it comes to policies, the policy readiness in Europe is good. All European Union member states, but also the member countries, they have adaptation or resilience policies adopted. They very often have even legislation. On the other hand, we see that there is a significant gap when it comes to implementation, and because of the pace of climate change and the accelerating risk, implementation has to be strengthened, where we need to apply the principle no one leaving behind, and the question of just resilience comes in here also in link to society 5.0. We need to also address the groups of most vulnerable, like elderly, children, youth, disabled, different groups of workers, and other groups. So I would say this is for the introduction all from my side. And of course, I'm happy to be here and answer all your questions.
Great, thank you, thank you. I think you very well sum up the issues that we face. I think, and this is not just Europe; this is around the world actually, where we're facing a risk to livelihood. All of us. I think I will shift over to Renita and just hear your thoughts on the matter. We've been discussing Society 5.0. What's on your mind when you think about Society 5.0? What are the trends that you would focus on?
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great a pleasure here to see you online. Yeah, when you ask about Society 5.0, in my mind is about disruptive technology. That's two words that make me more like I should understand what's kind of disruptive technology, especially when we saw right now we should be agile related all the technology that we face most fastest, and then also we face with AI. Beside that, also especially how about the work as visual work as virtual everywhere. Beside that, also with AI, also we work with a robot, we work with a machine, so we should adapt. If we not adapt, and if we not don't know how to use the technology, I believe we will be changed by the robots or by technology. So that's on my mind when you ask about Society 5.0.
There's so many issues, right? Because this is not just an environmental issue, and the way that we can use new technologies like AI. I mean, we can use it in you work with waste, right? The way that we can shift waste handling with the use of AI and so forth. But it's also, as you also point to, it's really about a societal level change as well. You know, it goes to the question of what is the societal fabric in the sense. I mean, is there job loss? Will certain countries, not be able to use their young workers and low cost workers, and thus not be able to actually shift into an environment because suddenly there's other things on the agenda. I think there's somewhat many issues here that we are facing, which is of interest. Turning again to you, Gerald, do you have any thoughts on some of the issues that we face and the trends that Society 5.0 affords us?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I really enjoyed your presentation, actually. It sets a very good context for our discussion today. I actually found myself taking some pictures of your slides because there are some things that I relate to quite a bit. And there was one point where, they had like the whole list which talked about, the unborn being not represented, no incentive for politicians to think long term. And it's quite interesting because in Singapore, our politicians do think long term, and I think the people here kind of like allow them to, we vote them in and we allow them to do that, right? But the interesting thing is there's still that disconnect where people are still not acting on the ground. And there's always this mentality, oh yeah, the government's going to take care of it. Rising sea levels, we're an island nation, so don't worry, they'll build a new island to block the rising sea levels, right? So the action on the ground is still quite, is still missing. And it's exactly what you said, like in that slide where this is decreasing, so you're worried about climate change, and then the action at the end is just minuscule, right? And recently we just got a report that stated that our recycling levels have dropped even lower to 11%, when our goal is to reach 70% in 2030 here in Singapore. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. It's exactly the issue that we are also currently facing in Singapore, and that's what EB Impact, as a charity, what we're trying to do, because we realize that there is a gap in understanding. So there is an awareness now on what sustainability is, what climate change is, but there is still a gap in understanding what they can do or what this is all about, right? And there's always that notion that, it's all discussed on the policy level. Businesses are doing it because it's compulsory for them to report it, right? If they're a listed company, and then that trickles down to the supply chain. But really, for the man on the street, that's still lacking. And so that's where we come in as a charity to address that issue.
And maybe follow up on that. I mean, you've been working with culture and the arts, and do you think there's a role for art in this? I mean, I keep getting back to, years ago, I thought very much about this as a technical challenge, a political challenge, and I think increasingly I think of this as a cultural challenge, in the sense that, bear with me here a little bit. If you think about what religion can do, religion is there when no one's watching. There's a moral where that you don't go and steal even though there's no one watching. You don't steal because there's a moral there you've been brought up with, and I think I kind of think about Khan, or when he Kent, when he says that the moral is that which you do when it doesn't benefit you. So how do we create a culture where people do that which it doesn't really benefit them, or it will benefit them in the long term, or their kids, or someone else, but it's not there here and there. It doesn't benefit them. And is there a place for culture or arts, or to push this through? Because we see that, we saw that in the States as well, when we had Black Lives Matter, that at certain points you can see really big shifts, and famous people coming in and stating something, and that really changes something. So what's your perspective on the role of culture in terms of social change, and to what extent we can do something here?
That's a fantastic question, and that's something that we are always looking into as well, the intersection between different sectors. And I think when we talk about culture, or we talk about media, right, as a medium, it actually can drive a much deeper understanding for people on the ground. So if you're into the arts, and if the arts starts questioning, certain practices with regards to sustainability, then that's something that you would then be exposed to, right? And also within EP Impact, we also look at training journalists as well as content creators on how they can report on sustainability, or create stories about sustainability, so that it becomes relatable. I think the key word here is, how do we make it relatable to people? Because very often, and this is my observation, I have to be honest, I'm actually quite new to the sector. I just joined the sustainability sector last September, and as Freya mentioned just now, before that I was really within the arts as well as social impact space. So coming in, I realized that, actually, that's the gap there. How do you make it relatable to people, such that they would think that, okay, this is applicable to me? And so within EB Impact, that's what we're trying to do as well. In we are trying to reach out to seniors because we are an aging population now, right? And what they do actually would affect a lot of things within our society because they form the majority of our population. So what we're doing is we're working with some of the social sector partners, trying to see how we can increase their knowledge and awareness on sustainability, but at the same time, also improving the health and well-being by doing so. So we are working with centers such as what we call the active aging centers. So the government has created many of these centers around our country for seniors to go to keep them active, right? And healthy. So what my team is doing currently is to start programs there. We call it the Seeds of Change program, where we educate them. So we basically convert those centers into sustainable cafes, for example, that's fully managed by these seniors, educate them on these things, right? Work with, say, a food bank to bring in some of these, the ingredients for them to work on, and educate them on circularity, for example, and we look at equipping them with the skills to manage a thrift shop within the center. So, I mean, these are some of the examples of what we have doing on the ground to try to continually drive not only awareness and understanding, but also to make it as relatable as possible to the people that we're serving.
Great example. Thank you, Angelica. I'm thinking in terms of new technologies. Is there anything that you see that is coming in that will enable this, and to what extent is from your chair? To what extent can organizations such as yours push this or facilitate those technologies and those changes?
I would say our work would not really be possible without technologies. So we all already utilize different kind of technologies to gather all this data. But before I dive into that, how do we do that, I just also would like to link to your keynote where you mentioned that citizens feel that they still need more knowledge and more data to be able to be sure to do, like whatever they need to do. And this we very often see also from the national level and also at the European level. We don't have enough data. And actually we have tons of data. But of course, we also need to know for what we need the data, how to use the data, and how to create knowledge out of the data. And I think this is a very interesting and important step and processing the data into something which is digestible then for the citizen, what is digestible for the youth or for the decision makers, for the politicians. Because all the trends, all our messaging, all our work is underpinned by data. Without the data, it's not possible. So here I see the role for technology and new technology. We need to utilize new ways how to gather better data and process the data. And I would like to highlight here maybe the Copernicus service of the European Union, which is part of the European Space Program. And part of the Copernicus is implemented and managed by the European Environment Agency. So the Copernicus has different components. We have a space component where we have actually Sentinel satellites screening the Earth, focusing on Europe. We have in situ data collection when it comes to atmospheric data or data related to sea or terrestrial land. And of course, then we have the services itself clustered to 6 fields. One of them is, for example, climate change. But we deal here at the agency with the terrestrial, with the land component of Copernicus. And then there are also others related to emergency action security. So this is already like very much tech-based to have some kind of satellites and some kind of in situ data and combining that and producing some kind of outputs. And of course, so when it comes to our work, we are busy with the land monitoring service, and we are preparing outputs, for example, better spatial planning, better regional planning. We are preparing outputs to support agriculture and food policies, but also other. And this service is free for everyone. You can either access the raw data, or you can visit different kind of browsers or dashboards where the data is a little bit pre-processed, so it's a little bit more user-friendly, I would say. And then you can use it. You can feed it into your work, and I can link maybe those things in the chat later, so everybody can access those websites easily. And last but not least, I also would like to emphasize two things: big data and big data analysis and assessment, and of course the role of artificial intelligence. We are very much right now having discussions and trying to figure out how the AI can make this work easier, and how we can develop our internal tools to get even better data.
Yeah, I guess I think you touched upon this in the beginning, right? We have a tendency to on the one hand ask for data all the time when we have tons of data, and what we need is not data, we need action. But on the other hand, we also need data, especially data that can support us, like satellite data that can look if people that are actually getting subsidies are actually planting what they say they're planting. So control data as well, so that we can make sure that we have and we can mitigate those and we can mitigate and make sure that we don't have corruption falling in this. So data is absolutely crucial. But at the same time, I'm just thinking about the latest issues we've had with, wanting a very, very full set of data, which has had which is where corporates have said, well, we don't think that it makes sense for us to report that much data because it just hinders the move towards a more sustainable economy. So it's very much about finding the right balance in also in the reporting standards that we have that we set up. Turning to Renita, you mentioned some of the technologies that you also are focusing on, and I think I would imagine that AI is gonna have could have quite a significant impact on waste management. What I hear in Denmark, to a certain extent, is that there's also an issue in terms of people have been used to a system for so long, mechanical recycling, used to collecting, and we've been taught to. We have 5 bins outside that we have to collect and our waste into, and this is taking a long time to do. And then suddenly people are going, well, there's also the possibility that we can burn all the waste and we can synthesize those gases into plastics and other stuff. So these would be potential future technologies that could come about. Are we sometimes in a situation where we have worked so long to push a certain agenda, and suddenly technology kind of leapfrogs, and then it becomes a difficult thing for us to actually take that advantage of that technology, because it is really difficult to actually introduce that to the public, because we have talked about this for so long, and now suddenly you're shifting, and potentially you could be shifting, and it does make sense. So are there also issues in terms of introducing technologies such as AI and other technologies where you think that there's barriers because people don't understand them?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. If I link between Gerald and also Angelic explanation and from yours, when we talk about waste management is super complicated that you shared before in Germany, in other European country that they do segregation process already, let's say 5 types. And then what's happening in my country, we still linear economy. So like they collect and then dump to the landfill. So this still problem. And then suddenly the technology came, and right now it's really happening that the minister just released, they call it regulation for waste to energy. So they burn, even they're not finished yet for education to do segregation process. Because when we connect with the culture, the important is reduction, right? It's not about, okay, we make many waste and then okay, they just burn with technology and then finish. Because when we talk that means that we not see about the air pollutions that will impact when we burn the waste, or even we use high technology to burn that. So this is kind of complicated when we talk about the habit that we built already, and then suddenly the technology came. And then about the culture, I can give some example, especially about our projects in Indonesia, because with Hub, we focused in some of the programs. The first is we help recycling centers to do the tracking for real-time waste management. So we know like how many kilogram, how many ton of waste that we collect every month. And then that will be calculated into, let's say, about their carbon, and then how they can about the transparency for the people and then for the community. So that's what we did since 2023. So for the organic waste, we do it to compost, and then the compost we make the other supply chain to help the farmers so they can use the organic compost. And then other one for residual waste, we make RDF, is like the fuels, especially that for some manufacturers, so they not use the coal. And then other thing is for the recycling, we bring to the recycling factory in Java. So even that make that habit is really complicated, because we use the approach for the culture, and then how the culture also work with the technology. So yeah, it's really struggling, especially when we talk about waste management and then with the technology. But the important is reduction is really important. Even how advanced the technology, if we don't know how to use that, it will be destroyed also for the environments. That's the point. So there's also how we treat the people, especially youth, and also youth in the urban area and youth in the village. The treatment is super different. Because we have some of program related for youth empowering program across Indonesia. We have around hundreds, 100 youth across, so they make programs. So when we talk about the urban youth, we talk about the validations, how they make a viral about their, let's say, the content, and then how they can also have the people, how the validation that they help the community. That's how we treat the urban youth. And then how we treat the urban, especially the youth in the village, is different, because they talk about the culture, how their parents help them. Let's say we use banana leaf to change the plastics, and then also we use others. We call it basic is to change the plastic for the cover of the food and also other beverages. So the approach is super different. So that's why uniqueness between culture and technology should be together. Because if we only introduce technology, of course, that we cannot also survive. What happened if the electricity off? How we survive, right? So
Yeah.
it's not only we use technology properly, but we also should be try to back to traditionally, but the mindset should be agility, especially for the disruptive technology. That's on my side.
Yeah, but I think it's so important that you mentioned what happens when there's a loss of electricity, because we have a tendency to put best practice in use in countries and forget about local circumstances. So I remember when I was in Indonesia, at one point they were building out solar panels on the roofs, and the problem was a coconut had dropped on one of them, right? And the guy who actually fixed them was like he was way off. So they've been having those solar roofs for I don't know how many years, and they hadn't been fixed because the guy who was far off, right? So we need to think about these the logistics issues and all these the local issues. Okay, I think maybe we should see if there are some questions from the audience.
Yeah, we have a
Maria, do you
lot.
have some questions? Yeah.
We have a lot. I'm really happy to see the engagement. I think we can start with a topic that has been very big in the chat. There's been a big discussion and debate on whether AI can solve 99% of all of our problems. But perhaps in the context of climate change and environmental related problems. Perhaps if any of our panelists, and you yourself, Martin, also, what your reflections are on to what extent AI can solve different challenges that we have, different problems. But there's also a question in the Q&A on how do we balance using AI and innovation with AI, with also the environmental impact that AI also has. I think there were lots of reports of how much electricity it takes for every AI or ChatGPT search, for example. So how do we balance out using technology for economic advancement, for solving environmental challenges, but also the environmental impact of these things? So perhaps we can have a discussion on this.
Well, maybe I can start out with taking the latter question. I think the surveys or the ones that you're referring to show something between 25 and 30% of extra power use that you need if AI is rolled out as we expect, and I think that's an issue for pretty much every country, because when we have issues enough. So in Denmark, we have to, just taking Denmark as an example, we have to expand our wind power by 4 to 5 times. Now, if you add 30% on top of that, it's going to be a huge issue. So I think the good side of that is, of course, the potential productivity gains, so that it should hopefully create more money if no one loses their jobs. And so that would create us more money to actually finance that. On the other hand, AI also affords a lot of efficiency gains, especially in how power is distributed among different actors. It does save a lot. It's been used in not a so much sustainable way, but it's been used in fracking in the US, has substantially reduced the cost. So there's a lot of areas where you can see AI coming in and increasing the efficiency, and waste could be one as well. So hopefully the net effect of that would be positive on the side of the environment. I will let the rest of you comment on the questions as well. Anyone?
Yes, I'm happy to follow up on that. Also, I was reading roughly the Q&A section, but there is so much going on there. I am trying to answer, but yeah, sometimes it's just listening in and answering, multitasking a bit. But so when it comes to AI, I would say personally, in the close future, it's definitely not going to solve our problems, because at the first, AI is not the source of our problems, so it cannot really solve it. It's like not gonna implement the changes which are necessary to improve the state of the environment, for example, because the source of the problem is somewhere else. I would say AI is right now becoming an extremely useful tool, but it still needs, and it's gonna need for a long time, the human brain behind it, because I started working with AI as well, and of course I noticed that the better my prompts are and the more I know what I really need to do, the better the results are. So I personally look at AI right now as a tool which can maximize the effect, definitely shorten time when it comes to, for example, assessing big data, but it definitely needs the creativity of the human brain, and it's just really not there. It's just asking it in a simple prompt of summarizing things. Yes, that's indeed useful, but still the better the prompts, the better the result. And it still needs to be quality assured and quality check everything what is done by AI. We cannot rely on it right now. So even if I work with it, I need to be sure that I resource properly. I need to be aware which data point is coming from where, if it's valid, because only in this way we are able to achieve valid results. It cannot be used in a way that we take the results on board without critical thinking, I would say. So if we want to aim using AI more and more in the daily life, we really need to develop our brains, and we also need to develop our critical thinking skills, which are really important skills to tackle these complex problems. So that would be my take on AI.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I do agree with Angelica about the critical thinking. Because actually for my side also I use AI only for tools, but the prompt and then other thing that I want to get should be even the sources should be valid. So not only let's say from other sources that even we not check, let's say from article or journal is not valid. That's based on my experience because I work many with the students because before I'm lectures, so many some of my students they just copy paste about with the simple prompt. So and then what I did to them, I give back their paper or their task and then ask them again, if you use AI, you should smart. You should use your critical thinking, not only copy paste, because I know which one is AI and which one is your, let's say, your thought, or if you use AI but not copy paste directly. So that's also what we should understand. And the exercise is really important, especially when we read a book, when we read the data, and then when we read articles or journals or other scientific things. That's super important.
Yeah, I think Renitia, it's interesting that you shared about the lecturing at the university, assignments, because I'm doing my master's in nonprofit management now in one of the universities here, and quite a number of my classmates actually failed because they used AI blindly, and they had like those references as well, and the lecturers knew, right? But that also brings us back to that point, right? If we talk about individual responsibility and culture, AI can't solve it. It's definitely not. It's definitely a tool for us to solve issues within whichever sector, whether it's the arts or whatsoever, even in the environmental sector. But at the end of the day, individually, you must know and you must have the understanding and the knowledge and critical thinking skills that what Renita mentioned to be able to deploy AI as a tool to then solve problems. So yeah, that's my take on AI.
I think there's lots of food for thought, and the questions and the conversations have continued also in the chat and in the Q&A on this topic. So I think it's a very interesting point to explore. I think changing the topic slightly, we also have, of course, a really diverse group of young leaders in the room with us today in the session. And there are some questions on, what can young people as individuals do? How can young people also, hold governments to account, hold political leaders? What are the actions or youth leadership actions that can be done to help with towards climate change, towards solving societal issues, but also when we're looking at technology, what should young people be thinking about besides these critical thinking skills, perhaps? What are the thoughts here?
Should I kick this off again? I think there's I think there is sometimes an issue, which is we talk very much about greenwashing in the context of companies, but we don't talk about greenwashing in the context of politicians and people. So sometimes we have, let's say you have an example would be making a green wall inside, like you have in the airport in Oslo. You're building a green wall inside, and it gives the perception that you actually want to do something for climate. The effect of that wall is it has 5 times the amount of carbon imprint than just a white wall, because you have to build it. It has to have water, blah 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 blah. So, and the white wall is still there, right, behind it. So we have a tendency, I think, to do something. And that also is the case very much when we look at the local environment. So we have a tendency to think that if we source things locally, it's better. But it really depends on, well, how, if you're driving around in a car to the different places that you're sourcing your food, it doesn't make sense. It's better to actually have it not flown in, but shipped in from someplace, other places in the world. So sometimes we overemphasize certain things and underemphasize other things. And the problem with that is that politicians sometimes do the same, and they do non-science-based policymaking where they don't go for science, but they go to what the people think, and what the people think are not necessarily True. So I think there's a complexity here that makes it sometimes difficult to act. But in terms of the question, what can you do? Very easy things to do is like stop eating beef or reduce your amount of beef to the extent you can. That will reduce roughly 1 ton of CO2. So then you're on your way. And then of course you can stop writing thank you to AI. That'll give you a little bit. When you heat your water in the morning and you do coffee, instead of doing 5 times a day, do it into a thermos and keep that all the day. There's so much things that you can do every day that will just reduce a little bit. Start with that because it's not that difficult.
I want to add more, especially what we can do, especially for youth. For my side, because we already have many technology, and the thing is, we should start life mindfully. I mean, we use technology, but let's go to the field, let's go to the farm, let's go to the beaches, and then talk with the people. Not talk virtually, but talk in persons, because the feeling when we have interactions with the real people is different. The interactions with the robots or with AI, that's super helpful. And I feel I use many technology, but I do regularly every month or every week. I met my team. I'm trying to talk with them personally. I go to the natural things so I can know what's happening at the ground. Let's say because we focus for waste management, we can use the technology. Let's say with the satellite, can see what happened in the maps, and then okay, that's open dumping site. So what we can do, and then the touches will be different if we go to that place and then we talk with the people. We do stakeholders mapping, talk about the leaders, talk with the community, talk about why they do open dumping or just throw the trash at the river or things. So the feeling is different. So that's why balancing between the real one and the technology is super important. Yeah, that's for my side.
Well, maybe I'll just jump into to talk about, I think Freya, you mentioned something about taking basically holding them into account, right? We talk about politicians, governments, and this was something that I learned. It's from a panel that I was moderating at the UNET's Sea of Solutions last year, and there were some representatives from Save the Children, and I thought it was very interesting what they did. Apparently, there was a campaign where they actually took a giant white teddy bear all around Nepal, and they called this bear Sati, the air bear, and it basically traveled around Nepal in a truck for 6 months to highlight the impact of air pollution. So basically, the white fur turned grey, and they took that bear and they went to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Action Weekend in New York and told the governments like, hey, please do something about it. So of course, it's one thing to be an activist, right? Protest, like that, but sometimes using such creative ideas to drive a point, right, and to prove that, hey, look at this, it's clear as day, that we need to do something about it, might be quite effective. So I mean, I'm just sharing this this little story that I heard, which I thought was just really fascinating to me.
Yes, and I also would like to follow up on the question because I think the youth's role is crucial. Like, please keep the system accountable. I also would like to bring in inspiration from the climate negotiations, from the UNFCCC process, where the youth always have a representative and asking the very valid questions. And I know it's not the youth's role to keep politicians accountable or keep the system accountable, but the youth is definitely in a great position to ask the questions, ask the really inconvenient questions when it comes to our future, the planet's future. And it's also very inspirational to see engaged youth. I also wanted to add another point because, of course, as we cover each European citizen, we also try to understand the motivations and maybe the fears of different citizens groups. And when it comes to the youth, we are very much aware that climate anxiety is on the rise. I know it. I know the feeling. Believe me, because I see this data every day on my board. So it's every day on my plate, and we are preparing the scenarios for until 2100 and beyond. We are monitoring also the temperature increase. So I know very well what you are feeling when you are maybe seeing the news or reading some study or studying it. But please don't be paralyzed by this climate anxiety. I really want to emphasize this, that as it was said in Martin's presentation, we can all do something. We just kind of need to hop over that ridge on your picture and not wait for everybody else to do something about it. Start from yourself, and if you feel like more, get engaged, get active. If you feel even more, you can study this, you can dedicate your whole life to this. This is becoming a profession. And of course, well, you can also go for a political career if that's your thing. So what I try to say is that if you can find yourself in this, don't really get this paralysis of either climate hedonism, where you kind of just gave up because nobody else is kind of doing anything, and then you just say, okay, I'm gonna enjoy this life because we only live once. And on the other hand, which is the other extreme, we see like, don't be paralyzed with climate anxiety. I know it's hard to see the direction the things are going, but there are plenty of opportunities to do something, and that really helps also for you, also for your community, and also for the planet.
Lovely. Thank you all. I think we're almost running out of time, so I'm maybe gonna summarize a couple of more questions in one final question, which is related to this human-centered thing. It's the human-centered notion that we've discussed a little bit when we've talked about the culture and the thinking and how do we have those cultural shifts. But perhaps your final thoughts on how do we ensure and balance human-centered thinking, this thinking about things ethically, inclusively, sustainably, when we are talking about using technology and using technology to solve our societal challenges related to the environment? Any final points or messages you want to share with our group today?
I just want to give one word, more empathy. Empathy with technology and empathy with people. Because if we have empathy, we can know to use properly.
I agree.
Sorry.
I would just add quickly, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just related to empathy, the human dimension of things. It's so easy to get lost in Excel spreadsheets and databases and AI, like Windows and Teams and meetings, and amazing that we can meet online this way, but still this has a human dimension. So keep that in mind, that we are all human.
Yeah, and I think Radhija, you've summarized it very well. I actually wanted to say something along those lines as well, right? Empathy, but something that what we are trying to drive at for our youth in Singapore, also to understand different viewpoints, right? And to understand the limitations on different, from different angles, so that once we can understand from the other person's viewpoint, we can then forge a way forward together. So that's what I would like to just end off with.
What I sometimes do is I look at a picture of Earth, I think, and think about all the people that's been in outer space, and pretty much every one of them, they come back and say it's the only time they really realize that we're all one, and you tap into that emotion because it helps me at least.
I think that's a really lovely point to end our conversation today on. I think I'm going to go away and look at a picture of Earth now after this session. But yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you, Martin, for your keynote, for your moderation, and to our esteemed panelists, Angelica, Ranita, Gerald, for joining us today. I think this has been a really fruitful discussion to give everyone here everyone really good food for thought on different topics, and I think we've really covered all dimensions of what it means of thinking about the environment and the future of the environment in Society 5.0. So thank you all so much. I think it's been really valuable for everyone today. So, and then a big thank you to all of our audience for joining us today. I think you've been extremely dynamic in the chat and in the Q&A. I know we had limited time to answer questions, but really thank you all for joining us and for engaging with each other as well, and engaging with our panelists. I hope you also continue these conversations beyond today's session with each other, with your peers across your communities. And then we hope to see you next week for our next session on what's the future of people and work in Society 5.0. We'll talk about some more dimensions of what the impact of technology is on our society. So in case you're not signed up, you can sign up using the QR code on the screen, as well as reading more about the other sessions that have taken place. So thank you again to our panelists, to our wonderful audience today, and we look forward to welcome you all again next week. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.